Harrow had never seen the stars up close. His entire world, the dry, golden hills of Wandle, the dusty cities clinging to the old roads, the patchwork spaceports filled with rusting parts and big dreams, felt like the edge of the galaxy. And in many ways, it was. Wandle was poor, not just in money but in standing. The Rowan, its native people, were proud, clever, and deeply rooted in their land, but they had no fleet, no vote in the Cinderella Confederation, and no voice in the growing conflict between empires. They weren't conquered exactly, just ignored. Like the Nemi, the Rowan had declined membership in the Confederation, not out of defiance, but because they simply couldn't afford the price of admission. The fees alone would have collapsed Wandle's economy. And so the planet existed in limbo, known but unprotected, seen but not taken seriously. The Rowan themselves were something of a curiosity. Biologically adjacent to the pill, they shared traits like wide, expressive ears and a certain grace in motion. But their culture, their aesthetics, their very energy was different. Where the pill were cold and methodical, the Rowan were bright, emotional, rustic. Their hair was thick and curling, dyed by nature in hues from buttermilk yellow to shimmering gold and deep violet. Their skin gleamed like polished amber or warm honey. To humans, they were simply adorable. The first smugglers to land on Wandle came across a village of dark-haired Rowan and dubbed them Banana People in their reports. Even after it became clear that Rowan hair came in every shade under the sun, the name stuck. Images of Rowan children, ears twitching as they held hands and stared in awe at human ships, flooded the human datasphere. People printed the pictures on shirts, memes, and mugs. The Rowan became cute, a novelty, and humans couldn't get enough. But fascination had a price. Rowan leadership saw what was happening. The visits from smuggling ships became more frequent. The requests for tours came next, along with rumors that some humans were trying to smuggle young Rowan off-world. Not for harm, not usually, but to show them the stars, to give them a better life. The Rowan knew what that meant. They had read the Waipal reports. They had watched what had happened to the Zamra. If they didn't draw a line, someone else would draw it for them. So the government slammed the door. Only 5 known human syndicates were allowed to operate on Wandle, and only in strictly zoned regions. Smugglers who'd built trust over years could still trade, cautiously. Tourism was banned. Any human not on an approved list was subject to immediate expulsion, and all ships were searched thoroughly before leaving, in case any Rowan had tried to sneak aboard. Of course, some still got out. The clever ones disguised themselves in cargo holds or bribed smugglers willing to risk it all. But most, like Harrow, stayed behind and watched from afar. He'd grown up with stories of Earth, of the endless markets on Mars and the orbital cities of Jupiter, and it made him ache. His own people were kind and passionate, yes, but they were also stuck. Harrow didn't want to die under the same sun he was born under. He wanted to see, so he found a different kind of escape. Taverns and Trolls was a human invention, a galaxy-spanning online RPG, packed with sprawling quests, infinite lore, and the one thing Harrow craved most: connection. The Rowan had their own games, of course. Little forest simulators, hunting tracks, dream logs. But TNT was something else entirely. It was chaos. It was laughter. It was voice chat with humans who called each other bro and made jokes about space bears and politics. It was alive. Harrow joined as a healer, Big Bungus Chungus, a wood elf with vibrant orange hair and a cloak that fluttered even when he stood still. He quickly climbed the ranks, earning real Earth credits for his skills, even going on loan to other guilds during major campaigns. In time, he became a core member of the Giga Chads, a human-run mega-guild famous across servers. They called him Banana Man, partly as a joke, partly as a badge of honor. The Giga Chads loved him, and Harrow lived for it. His ASGD headset wasn't made for Rowan heads. The earwells were always too tight. But he didn't care. He'd play for hours, raking in credits while sipping imported Earth snacks he traded for under the table. Peanut butter cups were his favorite. There was something magical about the salty, sweet mush, even if he didn't understand the obsession humans had with it. His life had settled into a rhythm. Wake up, game, heal, laugh, earn credits, go to sleep, repeat. He stayed out of politics. The Mandarin conflict felt far away, like a rumor told around a campfire. Wandel didn't matter to anyone after all. Then the alert came. It blinked softly on his comms display, interrupting his pre-raid snack. He had just peeled open a peanut butter cup when his screen filled with warnings. 20 pings, then 30. His heart began to pound. "Harrow, you online?" a voice asked through the headset. "The new wave's about to hit. Need you in group." Harrow barely heard it. I think we're being raided," he said, voice tight. "What?" came the reply. "You mean in-game?" "Number real life. I can hear them. Ships." And just like that, the line between fiction and reality shattered. In a bedroom lit only by the pale glow of his headset, surrounded by snack wrappers and soft hums of a cooling unit, Harrow saw the lights of invasion break across the sky of Wandel, his world, his home. And he knew. He wasn't just a gamer anymore. He was the only one who could sound the alarm. In a cluttered suburban living room on Earth, a teenager named John limped down the stairs like a man on a mission, clutching his ankle with one hand and yelling with the other. "Mom, call the army!" Jesselyn, halfway through opening a beer, didn't flinch. "What now?" "The Mandarin are raiding Wandel," he said, eyes wide. "You have to call the hotline. Harrow's there. He's going to die." She rolled her eyes and took a swig. "What the hell is a Wandel?" "Mom," John practically howled. "The Rowan. Harrow's a Rowan. He's our guild healer, our friend. He's like a brother. They're being invaded, and he's right in the middle of it." Jesselyn didn't even pause as she walked to the kitchen. "Is this like the time you called the military about that rock you thought was a spaceship? That was different. This is real. Harrow messaged us. He said there are ships in the sky. Ships. And he's stuck. You don't understand. We're talking World Hoyer level Mandarin." That got her attention, but only slightly. "Only adults can use the hotline," she muttered, then sighed. "Fine. But if this turns out to be another false alarm, I'm pulling the penalty fee from your college fund." John just nodded, already pulling up Harrow's messages on his comm. "It's not a false alarm, I swear. All the other moms are calling too." On board the military cruiser Big Mouth Base, Admiral Vincent and Colonel Shakes were halfway through lunch when the comm alerts started pinging. It wasn't just one or two. It was dozens, maybe hundreds of civilian-coded SOS messages, all referencing one thing: an invasion of Wandel. And one name kept coming up: Harrow. "They're all saying the same thing," Admiral Vincent said, holding up his slate. "Rowan under attack, Mandarin presence, civilian eyewitnesses." Colonel Shakes frowned. "The Rowan aren't Confederation members. We can't legally intervene unless they request assistance." Vincent sighed, rubbing his temple. "We're bound by the doorbell ruling. No entry without invitation, especially not for undeclared protectorates." Then someone played a video. It was from a Taverns and Trolls server, fantasy characters talking in-game, but the urgency was real. A wood elf character, voice trembling, begged for help as the sound of orbital strikes thundered in the background. "That's Harrow," a junior officer confirmed. "Confirmed Rowan accent. And the footage matches real-time visuals from Wandel. Orbital incursion confirmed." Colonel Shakes swore under his breath. "This is shaky legal ground. We can't prove that's a Rowan citizen under duress. Not without solid intel." Admiral Vincent didn't miss a beat. "Does anyone on this boat play Taverns and Trolls?" Half the room laughed. Someone pointed. "Sergeant Taskin, sir." They hauled the sergeant into the ops room and spun his headset around so the Admiral could speak directly into the mic. "Mr. Chungus," Vincent said, suppressing a smirk. The voice that came back was tense. "We are under attack. I counted 20 ships breaking Atmo. They're everywhere. I see flashes. Explosions. Do you have a telescope nearby?" "I do." Harrow rushed across his room, his long ears brushing the ceiling as he dropped to his knees and yanked the scope into place. It whirred, scanned, beeped. He peered through the eyepiece and gasped. "It's a World Hoyer," he whispered. "A full battle temple. That's it. That's the ship from the alert images. It's real." Colonel Shakes turned pale. "They're going to scour the planet." Vincent slammed his palm against the console. "Presence of a planet killer by a genocidal force. We have precedent. We move now." The ship snapped to alert. Sirens wailed. Deck plates vibrated under 1,000 running feet. "Battle stations," Vincent barked. "Prep for orbital drop. Armored divisions, scramble, launch fighters. I want a corridor open in space and boots on the ground in 2 hours." Sergeant Taskin leaned back into the headset. "Harrow, hang tight. Help is coming. Just hold the line." "I'll try," Harrow said, "but I can hear people screaming." And then the line went quiet. On the flight deck, chaos became purpose. Fryn, a YPAL trooper and seasoned vet, had just finished setting up a movie with her squad mate Raburn when the alert hit. She barely had time to grab her helmet before being shoved into a Yak-3 drop pod, alongside 2 humans and another YPAL. "What's going on?" she asked as she locked in. "Mandarin. They've landed on Wandel. They've got a World Hoyer overhead." Fryn muttered something unprintable. "Another day in the office, then." "All personnel accounted for," came the voice over comms. "Prepare for launch through active dogfight." Fryn blinked. "Wait, through the what?" No answer. Just the howl of klaxons and the rumble of the ship's hull as the drop bay doors opened. The void of space sucked the air from the chamber, and the yaks dangled over the edge like meat on a hook. Fryn looked through the viewport. What she saw turned her blood cold. Hundreds of fighters, human and Mandarin, danced in a deadly ballet above Wandel. Flashes of cannon fire, trails of smoke, and debris drifted past the hull. Beyond it all, the looming shadow of the World Hoyer cast a sickly red glow. All pods green. Release on mark. Brace for thunder. The yaks dropped in synchronized arcs, screaming toward the surface. Fryn gritted her teeth around her pineapple-flavored mouthguard and felt her stomach lurch. They were halfway down when everything went sideways. Mandarin bombers broke formation and began targeting the drop pods. A missile tore through a Higgins 3 transport ahead of Fryn's yak, turning it into a silent burst of metal, limbs, and fire. SAR teams scrambled to recover survivors, but dozens were already lost. Fryn's yak took a glancing hit and began to spin. Lights flashed red. Her pilot cursed as the nav system failed. "Fryn, we're off course," someone shouted. "No shit," she yelled, hugging her restraints. They broke through the clouds in a spiral, smashing through the upper stories of a crumbling building and landing sideways in the middle of a firefight. The hatch blew open. Fryn rolled out, blaster in hand, and started shooting. The Mandarin were already there. The Rowan had held as long as they could, but their weapons were outdated, and their vehicles already smoking ruins. Fryn saw one squad get vaporized by a tank blast before she could shout a warning. Her team followed her out. Paul and humans alike advanced, flanking and firing. She saw civilians fleeing through the smoke, Rowan mothers dragging children behind overturned stalls, guards crouched behind burning cars. She had no time to process it. A Mandarin hover tank came around the corner, its turret glowing blue. Fryn yelled, "Armor! Get to cover!" The street exploded. She scrambled, diving behind a cracked fountain. The Mandarin infantry pressed in, crystal weapons cutting through shielding but bouncing off human hardplate. She returned fire, spraying down the street and watching them scatter. A cry rang out in the Rowan tongue, someone pinned under debris. A young woman. Fryn didn't think, just ran. She took a shot to the shoulder, grunted, and kept going. She and her squad pulled the girl out just as the hover tank charged a new round. Then the voice came through her helmet. "You might want to get down." Fryn dropped instantly. A second later, an anti-armor missile screamed overhead and slammed into the hover tank. The explosion lifted her off the ground like a toy, spinning her through the air before she landed in a heap. She lay there, stunned, watching debris rain from the sky, and muttered, "Holy hell!" "Tanks down," came the calm voice of Sergeant Mackey. "Get back to work." Fryn laughed bitterly, then stood, racking a fresh mag into her rifle. Around her, humans and Rowan were regrouping. Behind them, the World Hoyer loomed still, but above it the sky was starting to shift. Destroyers were moving in. The cavalry had arrived just barely in time, and the real fight for Wandel had only just begun. The wreckage of the World Hoyer smoldered in orbit, breaking up into long trails of glowing ash that burned down through Wandle's skies like falling stars. For 3 days after the final Mandarin transmission cut out, the air above the planet remained thick with fire and dust. And for those 3 days, the Rowans searched. They searched through ruined towers, collapsed tunnels, broken schools, and markets turned to ash. They pulled survivors from the rubble with bleeding hands and scorched fingers. Human soldiers joined them. IPAL medics stitched wounds beside Rowan field healers. Even the baristas from Big Mouth Base landed in dropships, wheeling out caffeine and comfort like it was gold. There were no more battle cries, just the soft sounds of digging, of weeping, of hands gripping hands. And then silence. Wandle had survived, but it hadn't won. The numbers were brutal. 23% of the population gone in hours. The World Hoyer hadn't just landed. It had hunted. Every block it touched bore the scar of extermination. Rowan, who once feared smuggling ships, were now standing beside human soldiers, watching the smoke clear and asking, again and again, why? They got their answer from the Mandarin prisoners, twisted survivors dragged from bunkers and transport hulls. The invasion hadn't been random. Wandle was meant to be a sacrifice, an offering of life force to feed the Mandarins' frontline war efforts. In the zealot code of the Mandarin war priests, the Rowan were weak, distant, unaffiliated, easy, and valuable. No one was supposed to come. The Mandarin had seen Big Mouth Base and assumed it was a station, not a warship. By the time they realized their mistake, the sky was already on fire. The planet had been saved not by policy, not by treaties, but by a teenager with a gaming headset and a guild that refused to let him die. Harrow didn't see himself as a hero. He saw the names in the casualty reports, Rowan, Human, YPAL, and felt like he hadn't done enough. But when Colonel Shakes requested a call with him, Harrow had stood up from his station, brushed the crumbs off his hoodie, and told him the truth. I didn't call for help to be a savior. I called because I didn't want to watch everyone I love die. Shakes had nodded. That was enough. What came next, no one expected. At first, it was a trickle. A few Rowan soldiers, mostly veterans, approached the humans and asked to train. Then came the young ones, students, mechanics, guards, even farmers. Shuttles began arriving at Big Mouth Bass every 2 hours. Inside each were 50 Rowan, sometimes more, all standing in orderly rows, asking one question: where do we sign up? At first, the brass resisted. The Rowan weren't Confederation. They weren't authorized. They hadn't even been billed. The Rowan didn't care. They offered tribute in the form of people, willing fighters, pilots, technicians, healers. We have nothing else to give, one Rowan leader said during the emergency session, but we are still alive, and that life belongs to you now. The UAS Senate unanimously declined their offer of subjugation. Colonel Shakes delivered the verdict in person. You don't owe us anything, he told the assembled Rowan volunteers. We did what anyone decent would have done. But the Rowan didn't accept that. They couldn't. They had been raised on stories of sacrifice and pride, and their pride had been shattered the moment the World Hoyer tore through their cities. The only thing left to rebuild was honor, and they would do it with sweat and steel, or not at all. And so the humans relented. Training programs were expanded, requisitions were issued, drop shuttles were repurposed for transport, 1,000 Rowan queued in a single day, and then another 1,000 the next. Many of them had never held a weapon. That didn't stop them. In one of the cargo bays turned briefing chambers, General Greer stood beside Colonel Shakes and looked down at the rows of recruits. Among them stood a familiar figure. Orange hair wild, ears twitching, a look of stubborn determination etched across his face. "That's Harrow," the general muttered. "In the flesh." Shakes just nodded. "Looks like he's ready to earn it." Greer looked across the room, his voice low. "There are so many." "We'll need more ships," Shakes said. "They're not citizens. They're volunteers." A pause, then a soft chuckle from the general. "Fine, let's talk to the bananas." It wasn't long before news spread, first to the front lines, then to the core worlds. The Battle of Wandle became something of a myth, a folk tale, a boy with a headset, a call that pierced through bureaucracy, a world that stood, not because it was owed salvation, but because a group of people, strangers, friends, gamers, simply refused to let it fall. The Confederation didn't issue a commendation. The politics were too tangled, but the people remembered. So did the Rowan. Months later, long after the smoke had cleared and the last Mandarin wreck had been buried, Harrow stood in his new uniform, crisp, a little too big, aboard a training cruiser bound for Mars. The humans had given him a choice: stay and rebuild, or go and fight. He chose both. Before launch, he opened a care package from John. Inside were 3 things: a peanut butter cup, a patch with a banana logo, and a message. "You were never just our healer. You were always our brother." Harrow smiled, held the patch to his chest, and walked toward the stars. Behind him, Wandle glowed in the dark, no longer forgotten, and somewhere far ahead, war drums echoed. But this time the Rowan were coming.